Look, I know I'm late to the party on this review, but I still want to get my opinion out there in hopes of seeing better beat 'em up games. I'm sure by now plenty of Streets of Rage fans are tired of hearing this game be compared to SOAR 4, so let me clear that up a bit before we get started. They're both beat 'em up games, sure, but SOAR 4 is vastly superior, so the only real comparison that can be drawn is that they exist within the same genre. I've heard multiple reviewers say TMNT was made by the same developers, but failed to mention it was just .emu that published both games. If you played both, you can surmise that .emu likely had very little to do with how both the games play, or how they're presented in terms of art mechanics. You'll notice that Lizard Cube and Guard Crush are both missing from the credits for Shredder's Revenge, despite them actually being the studios behind the new Streets of Rage. To drive that point home even further, take a look at some of the other games from Tribute, and I'm sure you can tell there's a stark difference between them and SOAR 4. Anyways, enough about the lazy journal abilities of some game reviewers and on to the actual review. In the title I said Shredder's Revenge is bad, but that's not entirely true. In fact, the reality is much worse. This game is just flaccid, boring, and empty. It's completely void of interesting mechanics or moments and lacks any replayability outside of capturing footage for this review. This isn't one of those games that's so bad it ends up being good like Shaq Fu. Shredder's Revenge was genuinely trying its butt off to stack up against the current generation of beat 'em ups, while failing miserably to do so. No unlocks, no palette swaps or new outfits, no survival mode, no nothing really. This game brings nothing old or new to the table. Sure, the Turtles have some new moves and supers, but what's the point when you can boot the entire game largely ignoring all of it except the basics? They tried to implement a fancy wake-up system which is just clunky and basically useless. The timing on it is awful, and more often than not you end up getting hit the moment you stand up because there's a delay before you can attack. The game has this charge-up attack, but it's utterly useless. I mean, maybe it has a use, but I beat the game twice on the hardest difficulty without using it. There's a combo system, but the enemies have no weight to them, and they move so erratically, flying all over the screen, that consistently or reliably carrying those combos can only be done with a couple of the characters, and even then it's still spotty and unpredictable. There's this world map thing where you can revisit levels to do absurd and unfun challenges like finish the level without ever being hit or without using your super attacks. There's nothing unlocked, so you're basically doing them to keep the game as dull and frustrating as possible. Probably one of the only redeeming combat features the game has is the super attacks, and of course there's plenty of oversight here to ruin that too. You can press a button that does a taunt or meditation that fills your meter enough to use your super. It's cheesy and enables basically infinite supers, but I'll allow it since the combat's so lifeless otherwise. When you're doing the Cyclone Super with Raphael, you have so little control over where he goes, it really ruins it. You either have so much momentum you're spinning to the edge of the screen, or the inertia is so strong you can't move where the enemies are, so you end up wasting it. Which is weird because 30 years ago if you picked up a super spin, you had the precision of a surgeon with it. If you save up 3 super attacks, you can use Radical Mode, which makes your basic hits do more damage. I really like how they tied it to the same button as the taunt, so you can accidentally waste it thinking you're charging it up. The boss fights come in just 2 flavors, which are snooze fest forgettable pushovers and annoying phase boss that's immune to damage while having mechanics that are constantly seeking to damage you. There's a finicky revive system that allows for some clutch plays when the boss has completely trash AI, but some of them have targeting moves that are relentless and completely lock out your chance of getting revives, nullifying the whole system entirely during those fights. There are only like 2 or 3 difficult bosses, and they're only difficult because their moveset is just an unforgiving barrage of random attacks and events. To make these matters even worse, the last 2 bosses are an absolute joke. They do as much damage as a regular Foot Clan member, and look how you can just stand in one spot, wailing on the health bar with almost no risk of getting hit. Super Shredder is probably one of the most underwhelming boss fights in the game. You just dodge all of his highly telegraphed attacks, trying not to fall asleep while doing so, until he does this goofy overload animation where you're finally able to deal a few hits of damage to him. The only thing super about this Shredder is the fact that he's super boring to battle. There are plenty of TMNT games to compare Shredder's Revenge to, but none as memorable and epic as Turtles in Time. No, not that disaster. Yeah, that's the one. It's probably been forever since anyone's played Turtles in Time, so let's take a quick trip down memory lane.
Please, a moment to reflect.
It's clear Shredder's Revenge was meant to pull on the heartstrings of nostalgia, and I'm okay with the publisher and developers cashing in on that. But what I'm not okay with is when it's done so lazily and the price tag doesn't match the product. This game is $25 on Steam. I don't expect it to be half of a AAA game, but I do expect it to be better than a game released in '91. At the very least, I better get a trench coat outfit for Raph. Everything about this game's art direction and sound is worse in my opinion. None of the sounds are particularly unique. Most of them are just dull, muted, and stock. Just listen to these motorcycles. Or these grenades that Rocksteady is throwing. Everything sounds so generic. And it really bothers me when a game uses the exact same sound when you do a specific action, like Raphael doing this laugh every few seconds of gameplay. When you have the voice actor in the studio, would it really be so hard to have him do just 3 different lines for stuff that's going to be repeated non-stop during gameplay? I'm not claiming to be a sound technician here, but that doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility. I can only hear Casey Jones say,
"Batter up, Scuzz Bucket,"
so many times at one level. I don't mind the pixel art, and the approach is way too sharp for my taste, but the colors are nice. It's obviously better than trying to go 3D, but what's up with the awful proportions? Why is this car so much bigger than all the characters? The Foot Clan look ridiculous, by the way, and good God, what did they do to April? She looks terrible. Never mind her face for a second, look at her hands. The most redeeming part about this game is probably the opening cutscene. It looks really awesome and makes me wish instead of this game we got a small series done in the same art style. Anyways, the game developers say it has a dope mix of killer humor. I didn't see it. Hell, I don't even think the turtles say cowabunga in this game. Turtles in Time had humor, like Bebop and Rocksteady fighting each other when you beat them, or how Leatherhead freaks out and throws himself off a moving train. I mean, in that game, Toka jumps on Razor's head before riding him around the room. Then they turn into a puppy and Turtle flailing on his back. Actually, Turtles in Time had that blooper reel after you beat the game where it showed the turtles getting busted up by all the enemies in the game while giving name credit to each one. Humor is subjective, so I'll let this one slide by simply saying there weren't any times me or my friends were LOLing at something we saw in the game, unless you count the occasional chuckle at failed revives or getting bombarded with hits from every angle, depleting your entire life bar in a moment without giving you a single chance to react or outplay it. We always find those moments of unavoidable defeating pain funny for some reason, despite the unfairness. All in all, there's just not much going on here, and golden opportunities were missed, like having secret missions to unlock Casey, April, and Splinter to possibly warrant more playtime. No unlockable outfits, arcade mode is just story mode without the driving, no survival mode, cutscenes, or bonus content of any kind such as concept art. The soundtrack is really forgettable outside that one track that everybody's talking about from Raekwon and Ghostface. The combat seems intricate on the surface, but in practice simply spamming your super or basic attack can get you through the campaign on the hardest difficulty. If you're looking for a challenging or fun beat 'em up with fleshed out mechanics and enemy or level design, you won't find it here. Luckily for all the hardcore Turtle fans out there, this game has a very positive rating on Steam, which is truly mind-blowing from my perspective. My guess is a good chunk of them don't have any other beat 'em ups in their library, or just simply riding the hype train, not wanting to go against the grain. I played this on Xbox Game Pass, but had I spent $25 on it, I'd have refunded it somewhere around halfway through just from sheer boredom, and I was playing with a couple of my friends during my first playthrough. These are the type of guys who can make any game palatable. They were utterly powerless here. It's worth mentioning that sometime this year Konami is going to release a 13-game TMNT collection. Shredder's Revenge might have fumbled the Statue of Liberty play on this one, but owning all those other Turtle games will definitely have some value.